My name is Ashley Howard. I'm an assistant professor of history and African American studies at the University of Iowa. And I'm interested in telling stories about the Black Midwest, specifically kind of the second half of the 20th century around social movements, civil rights organizing, Black power organizations, and really thinking about the ways that people are trying to make America make good on her promise. Doing history is so exciting. In part, it's an act of imagination, and it's also a part investigation. So even if we're watching the same event happen, we'll have such, dramatically different ways of seeing it based on where we're positioned, what our interests are, what kind of baggage we bring to it. And history is the same way. We're all going to look at different moments in history with the things that interest us, the perspectives, the talents that we have. And so for me, to do history is to make a more complete story of what happens based on what is in front of us, both the primary sources and building on what other scholars have done before. It's difficult to balance the perspectives of people historically because sometimes those perspectives can be wrong. And so I think it's important to really lean on what people are saying and the time that these statements or documents are created and for whom. And I think this is a really powerful thing, that being a historian lends itself to being empathetic and thinking about how these stories are told and to whom they're being told. And I think about, perspectives about Des Moines' Good Park riot in 1966, or the uprising that happened that same year in Waterloo. While on the surface, it may have just looked like criminal behavior, socially deviant behavior. But when you stop to look at what these young people are actually asking for jobs, for better housing, for recreational facilities, you see that there's actually much more going on that is sharing their perspectives and what they see as being a part of the American dream that's very different from some of the other historical perspectives that are being amplified at the time. When we make a historical argument, we have to consider all of the available sources, in part because different people are writing for different agendas. It's so important to think about using different sources because this gives us a fuller picture of what's history. When we think about Edna Griffin, who launched a boycott, in effect, of Katz Deli in 1948 here in Des Moines, we see a very different perspective of how her lawyers are presenting her to help her win her case and who she actually was. So her lawyers are presenting her as, an upper middle class Black mother, a World War II veteran, very kind of upper crust and, leaning into what it means to be a good wife and mother of the era. But when you turn and look at other sources, you see a very more complex picture. For instance, she was organizing around anti-war activities against the Korean War. We see her organizing with labor unions. And we have this evidence from a whole different source, which are the 17 years of surveillance that the FBI was doing for her. And so in thinking about how her lawyers wanted to portray her to have a sympathetic jury versus people who are interested to see if she was doing subversive acts, we have two different stories of the same very important civil rights figure in this state. When we talk about doing history, it's not just about what happens, it's also about why it happens. So we're studying change over time. We're studying context. We're studying continuity. We're making the events that happen in our life make sense for the communities and the world that we're living in.